The courthouse steps were cold beneath my worn sneakers, each crack in the concrete seeming to mirror the fractures in what remained of my life. I sat there for what felt like hours after the judge's gavel had fallen. The manila folder containing my divorce papers clutched against my chest like a shield that had arrived far too late. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plaza, and I watched couples walk by, hands intertwined, laughter floating on the autumn breeze, wondering how I'd become so invisible that even my own husband had looked through me for 3 years. Useless. That's what Derek had called me this morning, his voice echoing off the sterile courtroom walls. "You're useless, Emma. You always have been." The word had lodged itself somewhere behind my ribs, a splinter I couldn't extract. I'd stood there in my thrift store dress, the navy one with the small stain I'd tried to hide with a cardigan, and said nothing. What was there to say? That I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through business school? That I'd eaten ramen for dinner so he could have steak? That I'd believed him when he said we were building a future together? The folder crinkled as my grip tightened. Inside were the remains of Emma Chen, age 26. No assets, no savings, no home. Derek had made sure of that. His lawyer had been sharp and expensive, all tailored suits and knowing smiles, while I'd represented myself with printed internet forms and shaking hands. I should move. Find the bus stop. Figure out where I was going to sleep tonight since the apartment, our apartment, then his apartment, now someone else's apartment, was no longer mine. But my legs felt like lead, and the exhaustion that had been building for months pressed down on my shoulders like a physical weight. The smell of rain hung in the air, that electric ozone scent that promised a storm. I needed to move before it hit, but I couldn't seem to make my body cooperate. People passed by in blurs of color and sound, cell phone conversations, clicking heels, the rustle of shopping bags from stores I could no longer afford to even window shop at. "You okay, miss?" I looked up to find a security guard hovering nearby, his expression somewhere between concern and impatience. Of course. Even here, sitting on public steps, I was in someone's way. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing myself to stand. My knees protested, stiff from sitting too long. "Just leaving." He nodded, already turning away, and I wondered if he'd even remember this interaction 5 minutes from now. That's what I'd become. Forgettable. Disposable. Useless. The rain started as I reached the corner, fat droplets that quickly became a downpour. I had no umbrella. Of course I didn't. Derek had taken that too, along with everything else that wasn't nailed down. I pulled my cardigan tighter and started walking, not sure where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stand still. The business district rose around me, all glass and steel and money. I didn't belong here. I belonged in the part of town where the streetlights flickered and the bus stop benches had broken slats. But my feet kept moving forward, carrying me past restaurants where the lunch crowd was just emerging, their expensive coats and leather briefcases a stark reminder of everything I'd never have. I should have been watching where I was going. The collision happened so fast I barely registered it. My shoulder connecting with solid muscle, my feet tangling, the sickening sensation of falling. I hit the wet pavement hard, palms scraping against concrete, the divorce papers scattering like wounded birds across the sidewalk. "Shit!" I gasped, scrambling to gather the documents before the rain turned them to pulp. My hands were shaking worse now, she smearing across the white pages from my scraped palms. "No, no, no." "Don't move." The voice came from above me, low and commanding, with an accent I couldn't quite place. European, maybe. Refined. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. I froze, one hand still reaching for a paper that was dancing away in the wind. Shoes appeared in my line of vision, expensive shoes, the kind that probably cost more than I made in a month. Black leather, perfectly polished despite the rain. They were followed by hands, large, capable hands, with a silver ring on the right index finger, gathering my scattered papers with efficient precision. I said, "Don't move," firmer this time. "You're bleeding." "I am fine," I managed, but my voice came out smaller than intended. "I just need your papers." "Yes, I can see that." There was something almost amused in his tone now, though not unkind. "But you're leaving blood on them, which rather defeats the purpose of collecting them." I sat back on my heels, looking up for the first time, and the words died in my throat. The man standing over me was striking. That was the only word for it. Not handsome in the conventional sense. His features were too sharp for that, his jaw too hard, but compelling in a way that made it impossible to look away. Dark hair, slightly longer than fashionable, was slicked back from a face that could have been carved from marble. His suit was charcoal gray and fit him like it had been born there. And even in the rain, he seemed untouched by the weather, as if the water itself was afraid to dampen him. But it was his eyes that held me frozen. Dark, almost black, and completely unreadable. They studied me with an intensity that made me feel stripped bare, like he could see every failure, every inadequacy, every shameful secret I'd tried to bury. "I'm sorry," I stammered, trying to stand. My legs wobbled and I nearly went down again, but a hand, that hand with the silver ring, shot out and caught my elbow, steadying me with a grip that was firm but surprisingly gentle. "Careful." He didn't let go, even when I'd found my balance. "When did you last eat?" The question was so unexpected that I answered without thinking. "Yesterday. Breakfast, I think." Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "I see." He still had my papers. I could see them now, tucked under his other arm, protected from the rain by his body. The divorce decree was on top, Derek's signature a bold slash across the bottom. My shame, my failure, held casually against the expensive fabric of a stranger's suit. "I need those," I said, reaching for them. "I know." But he didn't hand them over. Instead, he looked past me, and I became aware of other presences, large men in dark suits, standing at careful intervals around us. One was holding an umbrella, waiting. Another had his hand inside his jacket in a way that made my stomach clench with sudden, instinctive fear. Who was this man? "There's a cafe," he said, those dark eyes returning to my face. 2 blocks north. My associate will take you there, get you cleaned up, buy you lunch. I don't need... You're swaying on your feet, your hands are bleeding, and you just told me you haven't eaten in over 24 hours. His tone didn't change, but somehow it became absolute. "You need lunch. I don't have money for... Did I ask if you had money?" He raised one hand, a barely perceptible gesture, and suddenly one of the suited men was there, umbrella extended over my head. "Go with Marcus. Eat. I'll have your documents dried and returned to you." "But I don't even know." "My name is Damien." He said it simply, like it should mean something. When my expression remained blank, something that might have been satisfaction crossed his features. "And you are?" "Emma. Emma Chen." "Well, Emma Chen." He pronounced my name carefully, like he was tasting it. "Go with Marcus. Consider it my apology for not watching where I was going. You weren't the one who..." Nevertheless. He was already turning away, my paper still tucked under his arm. "Marcus will make sure you're taken care of." I wanted to argue, wanted to snatch my papers back and run. But the man called Marcus was there, silent and imposing, and Damien was walking away with a confidence that suggested he'd never been told no in his life. The other suited men fell into formation around him, 1 in front, 2 behind. And they moved through the crowd like sharks through water, people unconsciously stepping aside without even knowing why. I watched until they disappeared around the corner, then looked up at Marcus. He was massive, probably 6'5", with a shaved head and a scar running through his left eyebrow. The kind of man you'd cross the street to avoid. But his eyes, when they met mine, were patient. "This way, miss," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Mr. Volkov doesn't like to be kept waiting." Volkov. The name tickled something in the back of my mind. Some news story I'd half heard while Derek was watching television, but I was too tired, too hungry, too overwhelmed to chase the memory. So I followed Marcus through the rain, the umbrella keeping me dry for the first time in hours, and tried not to think about the fact that I'd just given my name to a stranger who commanded men with guns and collected bleeding women off sidewalks like they were lost pets. The cafe was small and clearly expensive, the kind of place with a single name in cursive on the window and no prices on the menu. Marcus held the door open, and warm air washed over me, carrying the scent of fresh bread and coffee. My stomach cramped with sudden, desperate hunger. "Sit," Marcus instructed, gesturing to a corner booth. "I'll order." He was gone before I could protest, leaving me alone in a space that felt too clean, too refined for someone with scraped palms and a wet cardigan. The few other patrons glanced at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. I wanted to disappear into the leather seat. Marcus returned with a waitress who set down a pot of tea, a first aid kit, and a knowing smile. "Marcus is our regular," she said warmly. "Any friend of his is welcome here." Regular. This mountain of a man was a regular at an upscale cafe. The disconnect made my head spin. "Clean your hands," Marcus said, sitting across from me with surprising grace for his size. "Food's coming." I did as instructed, hissing as the antiseptic wipes touched broken skin. The scrapes weren't deep, but they stung like betrayal, like everything else today. "Mr. Volkov is very particular about debts," Marcus said suddenly, watching me wrap gauze around my palms. "You'll get your papers back. He keeps his word." "I don't understand what just happened," I admitted quietly. Marcus's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy. "You had a bad day. Boss saw. Boss helped. That's all you need to understand right now." But it wasn't all. Because men who traveled with armed guards and commanded rooms with their presence didn't help random women on the street. There was always a price, always an angle. The food arrived. Soup, sandwich, salad, more than I could possibly eat. And my hunger overrode my suspicion. I ate mechanically at first, then with increasing desperation, barely tasting anything but unable to stop. When had I become this person, this hungry, desperate creature who accepted charity from dangerous strangers? Marcus said nothing, just sipped his coffee and watched the door with the alertness of a man who'd spent his life expecting trouble. I was halfway through the sandwich when my phone buzzed. Derek's number flashed on the screen, and my stomach turned to ice. "Stop telling people I'm the bad guy. You're embarrassing yourself. No one cares about your sob story." I set the phone face down on the table, hands shaking again. How did he even know? Who had I told? The answer was no one, because I had no one left to tell. "Bad news?" Marcus asked. "Just my ex-husband reminding me I'm useless," I said before I could stop myself. The words tasted like acid. Marcus's expression hardened. "The divorce that just finalized?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "He'd take everything?" Another nod. Marcus leaned back, and something dangerous flickered across his features. "Boss doesn't like men who hurt women." "He doesn't even know me," I protested weakly. "Doesn't matter." Marcus pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then set it aside. "You finished eating?" I looked at the half-empty plates, my stomach already protesting the amount I'd consumed. "Yes." "Thank you. Please tell Mr. Volkov thank you as well, and that I'll pay him back." "You won't." It wasn't a suggestion, but you will come with me. Boss wants to return your papers personally. Fear spiked through my exhaustion. "Why?" Marcus stood, dropping cash on the table, far more than the meal cost. "Because he asked. That's reason enough." And somehow, impossibly, I found myself following Marcus back into the rain, toward a black SUV with tinted windows that screamed money and danger in equal measure. The door opened, and I saw Damian Volkov sitting in the back seat. My divorce papers, now dry and neatly organized, resting on the seat beside him. Our eyes met, and something in his expression made my breath catch. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't pity. It was something far more dangerous. It was interest. "Get in, Emma," he said softly, and it sounded like a promise and a threat all at once. "We need to talk about your ex-husband." I should have run. Every instinct I had left, the ones Derek hadn't ground down to dust over 3 years of marriage, screamed at me to turn around and disappear into the rain-soaked streets. But my feet carried me forward, and before I could second-guess the decision, Marcus's hand was on my elbow, guiding me into the SUV's leather interior. The door closed with a heavy, final sound, like a vault sealing, like a cage locking. Damian Volkov sat across from me in the spacious back seat, perfectly still in a way that reminded me of predators on nature documentaries, that eerie calm before the strike. The vehicle smelled of expensive cologne, leather, and something else. Something metallic and dangerous that I couldn't name. "Your papers," he said, lifting the folder. "Everything's in order." I took the liberty of having them placed in protective sleeves. I took them with trembling hands, noting the clear plastic sheets that now preserved each document. The kind of attention to detail that spoke of resources I couldn't fathom. "Thank you. You didn't have to—" "Derek Matthews." He said the name like he was reading it off a list. "Married to you for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Filed for divorce 8 weeks ago, citing irreconcilable differences. Received the apartment at 48 Artois Morrison Street, the 2019 Honda Civic, and approximately $47,000 in combined savings." My blood turned to ice. "How do you—" "You received nothing," he continued as if I hadn't spoken, those dark eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "No alimony, no division of assets, no spousal support, despite working 2 jobs to finance his MBA from Preston Business School." The folder slipped from my nerveless fingers. "You had me investigated. I had Marcus make a few phone calls while you ate." He leaned forward slightly, and I pressed back against the leather seat instinctively. "It took 20 minutes to learn everything about your marriage, Emma. Would you like to know what else I discovered?" "No." The word came out strangled. "I want to get out of this car. Do you?" His head tilted slightly, studying me. "Because from where I'm sitting, you have nowhere to go. No home. No family in the city. Your parents are deceased, car accident when you were 19. No siblings. Your closest friend, Melissa Harper, moved to Seattle 6 months ago. You have $342 in your checking account and $17 in cash in your wallet." I was shaking now, fear and fury warring in my chest. "What do you want from me?" "Want?" Something like amusement flickered across his features. "I want to know why a woman who put her husband through business school, who worked herself into exhaustion for 3 years, who asked for nothing in the divorce, allows herself to be called useless." "You don't know anything about—" "I know that Derek Matthews is currently celebrating at Morton's Steakhouse with his business partner, Claire Stevens. The same Claire Stevens he's been sleeping with for the past 14 months. The same Claire Stevens whose father gave him the capital to start his consulting firm, the firm he built using your design templates and client research." Each word was a knife, precise and devastating. I'd known about Claire. Of course I'd known. But hearing it spoken aloud by this stranger, in this car that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice broke on the last word. Damien was quiet for a long moment, those unreadable eyes searching my face. Then he reached into his jacket. I flinched, I couldn't help it, and pulled out a business card. Simple. Elegant. Just a name and a phone number embossed in silver. "Because men like Derek Matthews believe the world owes them everything," he said softly, placing the card on the seat between us. "They take and take and take, and they face no consequences because people like you are too afraid to demand justice." "Justice?" I laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "There is no justice. He won. I lost. That's how the world works." "Is it?" He sat back, and somehow the small increase in distance made the air easier to breathe. "Tell me, Emma, if you could make him feel even a fraction of what he made you feel, the humiliation, the loss, the absolute erasure of your worth, would you?" "It doesn't matter what I want. I can't—" "Answer the question." The command in his voice bypassed my rational mind entirely. "Yes," I whispered. "God help me. Yes." Damien smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "Then call me when you're ready to stop being useless," he said, "and start being dangerous." The door beside me opened, Marcus appearing like a ghost despite his size. The rain had intensified, turning the world beyond the SUV into a gray blur. "Marcus will take you wherever you need to go," Damien continued. "And Emma, keep the card. You're going to need it sooner than you think." I grabbed the folder and stumbled out into the rain, Marcus's umbrella appearing overhead instantly. The door closed behind me, and the SUV pulled away from the curb with a whisper of expensive engineering, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with a business card burning like a brand in my pocket. Marcus drove me to a motel on the edge of downtown, Not the dangerous part of town, but not the safe part either. The kind of place that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask questions. I'd found it online during the divorce proceedings, when it became clear I'd need somewhere cheap to land. The room was small and smelled of cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner, but it was mine. For a week, at least, until my money ran out. Then I'd have to figure out what came next. I sat on the edge of the bed that sagged in the middle, staring at Damian Volkov's business card. The embossing caught the light from the flickering overhead fixture, making the letters seem to move. Just a name. Just a number. But something about it felt like a door I couldn't unopen once I stepped through. My phone buzzed. Another message from Derek. Claire and I are thinking about Bali for the honeymoon. Thanks for the suggestion, by the way. She loved it. Bali. I'd spent months planning that trip for our 5th anniversary, saving every spare dollar. Then Derek had canceled it 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, claiming work was too busy. Now I knew why. My hands moved before my brain caught up, pulling up my contacts, finding the number I'd just entered. Damian Volkov's name sat there on my screen, innocuous and terrifying. Start being dangerous. What did that even mean? Men like Damian Volkov didn't help people out of kindness. There was always a price, always an angle, and I had nothing to offer. No money, no connections, no value of any kind. Useless. I threw the phone onto the bed and stood up, pacing the small room. My reflection caught in the mirror above the dresser. Pale, hollow-eyed, with scraped palms wrapped in gauze. When had I become this person? This ghost? The old Emma, the one from before Derek, wouldn't have recognized me. That Emma had been confident, creative, full of dreams about starting her own design company. She'd believed in herself, believed in love, believed the world was fair if you just worked hard enough. 3 years had beaten that Emma into submission, reshaped her into something small and silent and convenient, into someone who apologized for existing, into someone who accepted useless as truth rather than cruelty. I picked up my phone again, Derek's message still glowing on the screen. The old Emma would have cried, would have blamed herself, would have wondered what she'd done wrong to deserve this. But something had shifted in the back of that SUV. In those moments when Damian Volkov had looked at me like I was a puzzle to solve, rather than a problem to ignore, something small and fierce had woken up in my chest, stretching after a long hibernation. I typed out a message before I could stop myself. How did you know I was thinking about Bali? The response came within seconds. I know everything about you, Emma. I always have. My stomach turned. He'd been planning this. All of it. The divorce, Claire, the humiliation. He'd probably laughed about it with her. This final twist of the knife. I looked at Damian's card again. Then I made the call. He answered on the first ring, his voice smooth and unsurprised. Emma, I thought you might need a few days. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt, in exchange for whatever it is you're offering. Men like you don't help people for free. Men like me. There was amusement in his tone. You've known me for 3 hours. What kind of man do you think I am? The dangerous kind. Good. You're smarter than your ex-husband gave you credit for. I heard the sound of liquid being poured, ice clinking against glass. To answer your question, I want nothing from you that you're not willing to give. I don't believe you. I don't care. A pause, a sip. But since you called, I assume you're ready to hear my proposal. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm listening. Derek Matthews and his partner Claire Stevens are meeting with potential investors tomorrow night, 8 p.m. at the Belmont Hotel's private dining room. They're trying to secure funding for an expansion of their consulting firm, using your work, your designs, your client research as their portfolio. How do you... I stopped myself. Of course he knew. Damian Volkov seemed to know everything. What does this have to do with me? You're going to attend that meeting. I'm not invited. They'd never... You'll be my date. He said it casually, like he was suggesting coffee rather than something that would put me in the same room as my ex-husband and his mistress. I'm one of the potential investors they're courting. They don't know that yet, but they will when you walk in on my arm. The image formed in my mind, Derek's face when he saw me, Claire's shock, the power dynamic completely inverted. For 3 years, I'd been invisible, irrelevant, useless. What would it feel like to be seen? To matter? Why would you do this? I whispered. Because I can. Simple. Absolute. Because men like Derek Matthews are parasites who destroy everything they touch, and I enjoy watching parasites squirm. And because you asked me to make him feel what he made you feel. I didn't ask. You said yes when I offered you the chance to be dangerous. That was asking. Another sip, the sound intimate despite the phone between us. Tomorrow night, Emma. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. Marcus will collect you at 7. I don't have anything that... You will. Check your door in 20 minutes. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to understand what I'd just agreed to. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear or exhaustion. It was something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Exactly 20 minutes later, a knock sounded at my door. I opened it to find Marcus holding 3 garment bags and a shoebox, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Volkov thought you might need these, he said, handing them over. The stylist will be here at 4 tomorrow to do your hair and makeup. Marcus, I can't accept. You can and you will. He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw something beyond professional courtesy. Boss doesn't offer things he doesn't mean, and he doesn't help people who won't help themselves. So help yourself, Miss Chen. Wear the dresses. Let the stylist make you beautiful. Walk into that meeting like you own the room. But I don't own anything, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I'm nobody. Marcus smiled, and it transformed his scarred face into something almost gentle. Tomorrow night, you're going to be Damien Volkov's date. In this city, there's nothing more somebody than that. He left before I could ask what he meant, disappearing down the motel's outdoor corridor with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd done this before, delivered mysterious packages, changed women's lives with a knock and a smile. I carried the garment bags inside and laid them on the bed, my hands hovering over the zippers. Part of me wanted to refuse this, all of this, to maintain some shred of dignity by rejecting Damien Volkov's help. But dignity hadn't kept me warm or fed. Dignity hadn't stopped Derek from destroying me. And dignity certainly wasn't going to put me in that room tomorrow night, watching my ex-husband realize I wasn't as useless as he'd claimed. I unzipped the first bag. The dress inside was midnight blue, silk that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Simple, elegant, devastating. The kind of dress that whispered wealth and confidence and power. The second bag held a black option, equally stunning. The third, a deep emerald green that made my breath catch. The shoebox contained heels I'd never have been able to walk in a week ago. But tomorrow night, I'd learn. I held the blue dress up to my body, studying my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was still pale, still hollow-eyed, still marked by Derek's cruelty. But for the first time in 3 years, she looked like she might be capable of fighting back. My phone buzzed one more time. Not Derek this time. Damien. Sleep well, Emma. Tomorrow we make him remember your name. I should have been terrified, should have seen the manipulation, the control, the dangerous game I was being pulled into. Instead, I smiled at my reflection and felt something dark and hungry unfurl in my chest. Useless? We'd see about that. The stylist arrived at exactly 4 p.m., a whirlwind of efficiency named Anastasia, who took one look at me and declared, "We have work to do, but good bones. Always easier with good bones." I wasn't sure if I should be flattered or insulted. She transformed the dingy motel room into a makeshift salon, spreading out tools and products with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Her assistant, a quiet young man named Jin, set up lighting and mirrors while Anastasia circled me like a predator assessing prey. "Mr. Volkov said to make you unforgettable," she mused, tilting my chin up to study my face. "He has excellent taste. This will be..." "Yes, this will be fun." "How long have you worked for him?" I asked, trying to understand the man who'd upended my life in a matter of hours. Anastasia's hands paused in my hair for just a fraction of a second. "I work for many clients. Mr. Volkov is simply one who pays very well and knows exactly what he wants." It wasn't really an answer, but her tone suggested I wouldn't get a better one. The next 3 hours were a blur of washing, cutting, styling, plucking, buffing, and painting. Anastasia worked with the focused intensity of an artist, barely speaking, except to give me instructions. Tilt your head, close your eyes, don't move. Jin assisted with the same quiet efficiency, anticipating her needs before she voiced them. I tried not to think about what this was costing. Tried not to calculate the price tag of transformation. Damien had said he wanted nothing from me I wasn't willing to give, but debts had a way of coming due when you least expected them. "Stop," Anastasia commanded, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Stop thinking. I can see it on your face, all those worried little thoughts. Tonight, you are not a woman who worries. Tonight, you are a woman who conquers." "I don't know how to be that woman," I admitted quietly. She smiled, something almost kind in her expression. "You will. The dress will help. It always does." By 7 p.m. I was ready, or as ready as I'd ever be. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. My hair, usually pulled back in a careless ponytail, now fell in glossy waves around my shoulders. The chestnut color deepened to something rich and multidimensional. My eyes, lined with expert precision, looked larger and more mysterious. My lips were painted a deep rose that made my pale skin seem luminous rather than washed out. And the dress. God, the dress. I'd chosen the midnight blue, and it fit like it had been made for my body specifically. It hugged my curves I'd forgotten I had after years of baggy clothes and self-consciousness, and fell to just above my knee, sophisticated and sexy without being obvious. The neckline was high, almost modest, but the back was virtually non-existent, exposing skin I'd kept hidden for so long, I'd forgotten it could be beautiful. "Perfect," Anastasia declared, clasping her hands together. "He will not be able to look away." I assumed she meant Derek, but something in her smile suggested she might be talking about someone else entirely. A knock sounded at the door at precisely 7 p.m. Marcus, of course, holding an umbrella despite the fact that the rain had finally stopped. His eyes widened fractionally when he saw me. The most emotion I'd seen from him yet. "Miss Chen," he said formally. "You look stunning." "I look terrified," I corrected, grabbing the small clutch Anastasia had provided. "That too." He offered his arm. "But Mr. Volkov says fear and power often walk hand in hand. You just have to decide which one leads." The SUV was waiting, sleek and imposing in the motel's cracked parking lot. But this time, when Marcus opened the door, Damien wasn't inside. "He'll meet you at the hotel," Marcus explained, seeing my confusion. "Wants to make an entrance." Of course he did. Men like Damien Volkov didn't simply arrive, they orchestrated. The drive to the Belmont Hotel took 20 minutes through evening traffic. I spent it trying to breathe normally, trying to remember why I'd agreed to this insanity. Every time my courage wavered, I pulled out my phone and read Derek's messages. The casual cruelty, the dismissiveness, the way he'd erased 3 years of my life like they meant nothing, useless. My hands clenched into fists, careful not to damage Anastasia's manicure. The Belmont rose before us, all glass and gold and old money. Valets rushed forward as we pulled up to the entrance, but Marcus waved them off, coming around to open my door himself. "Remember," he said quietly, offering his hand to help me out. "You belong here. Act like it." I stepped onto the red carpet, because of course there was a red carpet, and felt 100 eyes turn my way. The doorman, the valets, the guests coming and going. All of them looking, assessing, wondering who I was. For 3 years I'd been invisible. Now I was blinding. Marcus guided me through the lobby, his hand light on my elbow but his presence absolute. People moved out of our way instinctively, responding to something in his bearing that screamed danger and authority. We bypassed the main elevators, heading instead to a private one at the back of the lobby. "VIP access," Marcus explained, pressing his thumb to a scanner. "Mr. Volkov owns a significant share of this hotel. Of course he did." The elevator rose silently, and my stomach rose with it. In a few minutes, I'd be face to face with Derek, with Claire, with all the investors who were about to fund a business built on my stolen work. What was I doing? This wasn't me. I wasn't the kind of person who played games or sought revenge or walked into fancy hotels on the arm of dangerous men, except maybe I was. Maybe I'd always had this inside me, waiting for someone to give me permission to be something other than small and silent and convenient. The elevator doors opened onto a private corridor, plush carpet muffling our footsteps. Marcus led me to a set of double doors at the end, and I could hear voices inside, laughter, the clink of glasses, Derek's voice rising above the others in that confident tone he'd perfected. "I should warn you," Marcus said, hand on the door handle. "Mr. Volkov has a flair for the dramatic. Don't be startled by whatever happens next." Before I could ask what he meant, the doors swung open. The private dining room was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table set for 12 with china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. 8 people were already seated, champagne glasses in hand, and every single one of them turned to look at me. But I only saw Derek. He sat at the head of the table, Claire beside him in a red dress that screamed trying too hard. His expression when he saw me was everything I'd hoped for. Shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear flickering across his features before he managed to school them into false confidence. "Emma?" He half rose from his seat. "What are you doing here?" I opened my mouth to answer, but a voice came from behind me instead. "She's with me." Damien Volkov stepped into the doorway, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was devastating in a black suit that made his earlier outfit look casual. His hair swept back, those dark eyes scanning the room with the kind of assessment that made grown men shift uncomfortably in their seats. His hand found the small of my exposed back, warm and possessive, and I fought not to shiver at the contact. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, guiding me into the room with that same effortless authority. "My apologies for the late arrival. Traffic was abominable." Derek's face had gone pale. "Mr. Volkov, I didn't realize we weren't expecting—" "No?" Damien's eyebrows rose in polite surprise. "How strange. I received a very enthusiastic pitch from your partner, Ms. Stevens, just last week. Something about a consulting firm with revolutionary client engagement strategies." Claire had frozen, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. She looked between Damien, me, and Derek with growing panic. "I thought it prudent to investigate before committing significant capital," Damien continued, pulling out a chair for me directly across from Derek. His hands lingered on my shoulders for a moment, a clear claiming that made Derek's jaw clench. And imagine my surprise when I discovered that the brilliant mind behind these revolutionary strategies was not, in fact, either of you. The silence that followed was absolute. "I don't know what you've heard," Derek started, finding his voice. "But Emma was just what?" Damien's voice cut like a blade. "Just your wife who designed every template in your portfolio? Just the woman who conducted all your market research? Just the person who built your client engagement framework from the ground up while you were getting your MBA?" He moved around the table with predatory grace, never taking his eyes off Derek. The other investors, successful-looking men and women in expensive suits, watched with the fascination of people witnessing a car crash. "Mr. Volkov," Claire interjected, her voice shaking slightly. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. Emma was involved in the early stages, certainly, but the real innovation came from you." Damien turned those dark eyes on her, and she actually shrank back in her seat. "The woman whose previous job was in HR? Whose educational background is in communications? Who has never, in her entire professional career, demonstrated any aptitude for business strategy or client management?" Claire's face flushed red. "That's not fair. You don't know." "I know everything, Miss Stevens." He said it simply, a statement of fact rather than a boast. "I know that you began your affair with Mr. Matthews 14 months ago. I know that your father provided the seed capital for this firm in exchange for a promised return that you have no realistic way of delivering. I know that every single client you've retained was initially contacted and researched by Emma, and that your retention rates have dropped 43% since she left." Derek shot to his feet. "Now wait just a minute. Sit down." Damien didn't raise his voice, but Derek sat like a puppet with cut strings. "I'm not finished." My heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone must be able to hear it. Damien's hand found my shoulder again, a steady presence that kept me grounded as he systematically dismantled Derek's facade. "I came here tonight to evaluate an investment opportunity," Damien continued, addressing the entire table now. "What I found instead was theft, fraud, and two people so delusional they believed they could build an empire on someone else's foundation without consequence." One of the other investors, a silver-haired woman in pearls, leaned forward. "Mr. Volkov, these are serious allegations. Do you have proof?" "I have 3 years of Emma's emails, file metadata showing creation dates and authors, client testimonials crediting her specifically, and testimony from 4 former colleagues willing to verify her contributions." He smiled, and it was terrifying. "I also have an excellent legal team who would be delighted to pursue both civil and criminal charges for intellectual property theft." Derek's face had gone from pale to gray. "You can't. She signed an NDA when we divorced. She has no rights to—" "An NDA signed under duress without legal representation in exchange for nothing." Damien's voice was ice. "Do you really want to test how that would hold up in court, Mr. Matthews?" The room had gone so quiet I could hear the city sounds through the windows. Distant traffic, wind against glass, the beat of my own heart. "What do you want?" Derek finally asked, and his voice was small, defeated, the way mine had been in the courthouse. Damien looked down at me, his expression softening fractionally. "That's not my decision to make." Every eye in the room turned to me. For 3 years I'd had no voice, no power, no choice in anything that mattered. Derek had made every decision, controlled every aspect of our lives, reduced me to something so small I'd forgotten I was ever anything else. Now, with Damien Volkov's hand on my shoulder, and Derek Matthews looking at me like I held his entire future in my hands, I remembered. I stood slowly, smoothing the midnight blue dress, feeling the weight of the room's attention. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. "I want my name," I said quietly. "On every template, every strategy document, every piece of work I created. I want public acknowledgement of my contributions, and I want 50% of the company I built while you took credit and called me useless." Derek's mouth fell open. 50%? That's insane. I'll never— "Then I'll see you in court," I said. And my voice didn't shake at all. "And when I'm done, you won't have 50% or even 5%. You'll have nothing but legal fees and a reputation as the man who stole from his wife." Claire grabbed Derek's arm, whispering urgently in his ear. The other investors were already standing, gathering their things, clearly wanting no part of this disaster. Damien pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then showed Derek the screen. "My lawyers have already drafted the paperwork. You have until midnight tonight to sign. After that, the offer expires, and Emma pursues full ownership plus damages." "This is blackmail," Derek spat. "This is justice," Damien corrected. "Something you should have considered before you decided to destroy a good woman for your own gain." I watched Derek's face cycle through emotions. Rage, disbelief, calculation, and finally, defeat. He knew he was beaten, knew that whatever power he'd held over me was gone, burned away in the light of Damien Volkov's intervention. "Fine," he said finally, the word like glass in his throat. "I'll sign." "Excellent." Damien's hand moved from my shoulder to the small of my back again, guiding me toward the door. "Marcus will deliver the contracts within the hour. I suggest you read them carefully before signing. Emma's lawyers will be very thorough in ensuring you honor every clause." We were almost to the door when Derek called out, his voice cracking. "Emma, wait." I turned, and for just a moment, I saw the man I'd married, young, uncertain, almost vulnerable. The man who'd promised me forever and then forgot what the word meant. "I never meant to." He stopped, swallowed hard. "You weren't really useless. I needed you to believe you were, so you wouldn't leave." The admission hung in the air between us, ugly and honest. "I know," I said softly. "That's what made it unforgivable." Then I walked out on Derek Matthews' life the same way he'd walked out on mine, without looking back. The elevator doors closed on Derek's devastated face, and the silence that followed felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Damien stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, but he didn't touch me, didn't speak. just watched the numbers descend with that same unsettling calm. My hands were shaking. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the full weight of what had just happened crashed over me like a wave. I'd just demanded 50% of a company. I'd stood up to Derek. Breathe, Emma. Damien's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. You're hyperventilating. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to slow my racing heart. I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe you. What if he doesn't sign? What if he calls your bluff about the lawyers and the evidence and it wasn't a bluff? He turned to face me fully, and in the elevator's confined space, he seemed even larger, more overwhelming. Every word I said was true. I have the evidence. I have the lawyers. And by midnight tonight, you'll have exactly what you deserve. Why? The question burst out of me. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Men like you don't just help random women off the street unless there's something in it for them. His expression shifted, something dark and complicated flickering in those bottomless eyes. You're right. I don't. My stomach dropped. So what's the price? What do you want from me? The elevator chimed, doors opening onto the lobby. Damien stepped out without answering, and I had no choice but to follow, my heels clicking against marble as I hurried to keep up with his longer stride. Marcus materialized from somewhere, falling into step behind us with that ghost-like efficiency. The lobby was busier now, evening guests checking in, couples heading to the restaurant. All of them parted for Damien like the Red Sea, some instinct warning them to get out of his way. A few stared at me, the woman in the midnight blue dress on the arm of the most dangerous man in the room. We didn't go to the SUV. Instead, Damien guided me toward a private elevator bank I hadn't noticed before, his hand once again finding that possessive place on my lower back. The touch was becoming familiar, almost comforting, which should have terrified me more than it did. Where are we going? I asked as he pressed his thumb to another scanner. Somewhere we can talk without your ex-husband's lawyers potentially recording the conversation. The elevator opened into what was clearly a private residence, the penthouse. Of course. After you. I should have refused, should have demanded answers before stepping into a billionaire's apartment alone. But my feet carried me forward, drawn by some combination of curiosity, exhaustion, and the growing awareness that Damien Volkov was the most interesting thing that had happened to me in years. The penthouse was stunning, all floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and art that probably belonged in museums. But it was also strangely impersonal, like a very expensive hotel suite rather than someone's home. Do you actually live here? I asked, moving toward the windows. The city sprawled below us, lights flickering like fallen stars. Sometimes. He shrugged off his jacket, draping it over a chair, and began rolling up his shirt sleeves. The gesture was oddly intimate, domestic in a way that didn't match the man. I have several properties. This one is convenient for business. Business. I turned to face him, drawing on the courage that had carried me through the confrontation with Derek. Like destroying my ex-husband's company? Is that what you do? Find broken people and offer them revenge? Is that what you think tonight was? He moved to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of something amber and expensive. Revenge? Wasn't it? No. He crossed to me, holding out one of the glasses. Tonight was about returning what was stolen. There's a difference. I took the glass but didn't drink. You still haven't answered my question. What do you want from me? Damien was quiet for a long moment, studying me with that intensity that made me feel like he could see straight through to my bones. Then he smiled, and it was nothing like the terrifying expression he'd worn in the dining room. This smile was almost gentle. Honestly, I don't know yet. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He moved past me to the windows, looking out at his city. When I saw you fall on that sidewalk today, covered in rain and blood and divorce papers, do you know what I thought? That I was pathetic? That you were wasted. He glanced back at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Beautiful, intelligent, clearly capable, and completely convinced you were worthless. It made me angry. Why would that make you angry? You didn't know me. Because I know men like Derek Matthews. His voice hardened. Men who take and break and discard, who build themselves up by tearing others down. My father was one of them. He spent 30 years destroying my mother, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a shell who couldn't even remember she'd once been extraordinary. The admission hung between us, raw and unexpected. For the first time since I'd met him, Damian Volkov looked almost human, almost vulnerable. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Don't be." He turned back to the window. "She's free now. He's dead, and she's rebuilding herself into someone remarkable. But it took decades, Emma. Decades of her life wasted on a man who didn't deserve to breathe the same air. So you're saving me from that fate? Is that it? I'm giving you the tools to save yourself." He finished his drink in one swallow. "What you do with them is entirely up to you." I stared at his reflection in the glass, trying to reconcile the man who'd systematically dismantled Derek's life with the man who'd just shared something painful and personal. "Who are you, Damian Volkov?" "Really? That's a complicated question. I've got time." He laughed, the sound surprising and genuine. "Do you? Because Marcus tells me you're staying in a motel that charges by the week and you have approximately enough money to last another 4 days." The reminder of my situation landed like a punch. In the chaos of the evening, I'd almost forgotten that I had nowhere to go after tonight. No home, no job, no plan beyond making Derek feel a fraction of what he'd made me feel. "I'll figure something out," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "You will." Damian set his glass down and moved toward me with that predatory grace. "But first, you're going to hear my proposal. I thought you said you didn't know what you wanted from me." I lied. He stopped close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "I know exactly what I want, Emma. I'm just not sure you're ready to hear it." My pulse hammered in my throat. "Try me." "I want you to work for me." Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. "Work for you? Doing what?" "What you did for Derek, but with actual recognition and compensation." He began to pace, energy thrumming through him now. "I acquire companies, Emma. Struggling businesses, failing ventures, organizations hemorrhaging money because they have no idea how to engage with their clients or streamline their operations. You have a gift for seeing what's broken and knowing how to fix it. I want that gift working for me instead of wasting away in whatever dead-end job you'd settle for out of desperation. I don't have a degree. I don't have experience beyond... You have 3 years of building a consulting firm from nothing while your husband took credit. You have a mind that sees patterns and solutions where others see chaos. And you have something even more valuable. You're hungry." His eyes locked on mine. Hungry people work harder, think faster, fight fiercer. Derek tried to starve that out of you, but it's still there. I saw it tonight when you demanded what was yours. I shook my head, overwhelmed. "This is insane. You can't just offer someone a job because you saw them fall down on the sidewalk." "I can do whatever I want." He said it simply, a statement of fact. That's what power means, Emma. The freedom to make decisions that others would call crazy and make them work anyway. And if I say no, then Marcus will take you back to your motel, Derek will sign the papers, and you'll have 50% of a company you can sell or run as you see fit. Your life, your choice. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive and distinctly him. "But if you say yes, I'll give you an apartment, a salary that will make Derek's income look like pocket change, and the chance to prove to yourself that you were never useless, just underestimated." My head was spinning. This morning I'd been sitting on courthouse steps, convinced my life was over. Now I was standing in a billionaire's penthouse, being offered a job and an apartment and a future I'd never even dreamed of reaching for. "What's the catch?" I whispered. "The catch is that you'll work harder than you've ever worked in your life. That you'll be challenged and pushed and forced to grow beyond what you think you're capable of. That you'll owe your success to no one but yourself, which means you can't hide behind excuses or self-pity when things get difficult. That's it? Just work hard?" "Just work hard." He smiled slightly. "Though I should warn you, I'm not an easy man to work for. I demand excellence. I don't tolerate excuses, and I have very little patience for incompetence." Sounds familiar. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "I'm nothing like your ex-husband." His voice dropped, dangerous, and soft. When I push you, it will be because I see your potential and refuse to let you waste it. When I challenge you, it will be because I know you can meet that challenge. And when I reward you, it will be because you earned it, not because I'm trying to keep you small and dependent. The difference between his intensity and Derek's manipulation should have been obvious. But 3 years of abuse had taught me to distrust any man who claimed to want what was best for me. I need time to think, I said. No, you don't. He tilted his head, studying me. You're going to say yes because the alternative is going back to that motel room and spending the next weeks or months rebuilding a life from nothing, while Derek and Claire walk away with barely a scratch. You're going to say yes because some part of you is tired of being afraid. And you're going to say yes because you want to know what it feels like to be dangerous. He was right. God help me. He was right about all of it. Yes, I breathed. Damien's smile was triumphant. Good. Marcus will move you into one of my properties tomorrow. It's secure, furnished, and close to the office. You'll start on Monday. That's 3 days away. You need a weekend to rest and prepare. Trust me, you'll want it. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I'm sending you the address and access codes now. Take the weekend to settle in, buy whatever you need. There's a company card being couriered to you in the morning. Damien, I can't just accept. You can, and you will. He pocketed his phone and moved toward the elevator. Marcus is waiting downstairs. He'll take you back to the motel to collect your things, then to your new apartment. I followed him, my mind reeling with how quickly my entire life had changed. At the elevator, I turned to face him, needing to understand one more thing. Earlier, you said your mother rebuilt herself after your father died. How? His expression softened. She remembered who she was before he convinced her she was nothing. Then she became that woman again, only stronger. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture that was surprisingly tender. You'll do the same, Emma. I have no doubt. The elevator opened, and Marcus was indeed waiting, but before I could step inside, Damien caught my wrist, his thumb pressing against my racing pulse. One more thing, he said quietly. Derek was wrong about you. You were never useless. You were just with the wrong man. Then he released me and stepped back, and I had no choice but to enter the elevator, my wrist still tingling from his touch. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Damien Volkov standing in his penthouse, watching me leave with an expression I couldn't quite read. It should have frightened me. The intensity, the control, the way he'd rearranged my entire life in less than 24 hours. Instead, for the first time in 3 years, I felt alive. The apartment Damien had arranged was nothing like I'd expected. I'd braced myself for something cold and modern, all glass and steel like his penthouse. Instead, Marcus delivered me to a converted brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood I'd only ever walked through while dreaming of a different life. The building was elegant without being ostentatious. The kind of place where young professionals and small families lived, where people walked dogs and knew their neighbors' names. The apartment itself was on the 3rd floor, spacious and warm with exposed brick walls, hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning light, and furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. There were bookshelves waiting to be filled, a kitchen with actual counter space, and windows that overlooked a small park where children were already playing despite the early hour. Mr. Volkov thought you'd prefer something that felt like a home, Marcus explained, setting down the single garbage bag that contained everything I owned, rather than just a place to sleep. I turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. How did he know what I'd prefer? He doesn't know me. Marcus's expression suggested he knew something I didn't. Boss has good instincts about people. Trust them. He left me there with instructions to rest, a folder containing building information and emergency contacts, and a reminder that the company card would arrive by noon. Then I was alone in an apartment that was mine, but also somehow Damien's, surrounded by silence that felt more significant than any I'd experienced before. I spent Saturday in a daze, alternating between exploring my new space and convincing myself this was real. The company card arrived as promised, delivered by a courier who had me sign for it like it was made of gold. Maybe it was. The black metal was heavy in my hand, Damien's company logo embossed in silver. My name printed below it. Emma Chen. Not Emma Matthews, not Derek's wife. Just me. I used it to order groceries, then immediately panicked about whether that was appropriate. But Damien had said to buy whatever I needed. And I needed food. The delivery arrived within an hour, more than I'd ordered, with a note. Marcus says you don't eat enough. Fix that. DV. Despite everything, I smiled. Sunday, I forced myself to go shopping for work clothes. The boutiques in my new neighborhood were far nicer than anywhere I'd shopped in years, and I felt like an imposter trying on blazers and pencil skirts and blouses that actually fit properly. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the look on Derek's face when I'd demanded 50% of the company, the way he'd shrunk in his seat when Damien had systematically destroyed his credibility. I bought the clothes. That evening, my phone rang. An unknown number, but somehow I knew who it would be before I answered. Emma. Damien's voice was rougher than usual, like he'd been talking for hours. How's the apartment? It's perfect, I admitted, curling up on the couch that still smelled faintly of cedar and newness. Too perfect. I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake. No mistake. A pause. The sound of papers rustling. Derek signed the contracts. As of midnight last night, you own 50% of Matthews and Stevens Consulting. My breath caught. He actually did it. Did you doubt he would? I doubted everything about the last 48 hours was real. It's real. Something shifted in his tone, became more intimate. How do you feel? Terrified. Powerful. Guilty. Angry. I laughed shakily, like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm about to fly or fall. Then jump, Emma, I'll catch you. The promise in those words made my chest tight. You don't even know if I can do this job. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I fail? Then you'll fail, learn from it, and try again. He said it so simply, like failure was just another step in a process, rather than the end of the world. But you won't fail. You're too stubborn for that. You've known me for 2 days. How can you possibly? I've spent 48 hours watching you. That's more than enough time to see who you really are when you're not being crushed under someone else's expectations. Papers rustled again. Get some sleep, Emma. Tomorrow is going to be intense. Damien? I stopped him before he could hang up. Thank you. For everything. Thank me by proving me right about you. His voice softened. Good night, Emma. The line went dead, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the growing realization that Damien Volkov had somehow become the most important person in my rapidly transforming life. Monday morning arrived with crisp autumn sunshine and a level of anxiety that made me nauseous. I dressed carefully in one of my new outfits, a charcoal gray suit that made me look competent and professional, and spent 20 minutes on my hair and makeup, trying to recreate what Anastasia had achieved. The result wasn't perfect, but it was me. A better version, maybe, or just a version that had permission to be visible. Marcus arrived at exactly 8:30, his approval evident in the slight nod he gave when I answered the door. Ready? He asked. Not even a little bit. He smiled, the scar through his eyebrow crinkling. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. The drive to Volkov Industries took 15 minutes through morning traffic. The building rose 30 stories above the financial district, all dark glass and sharp angles that screamed power and money. My stomach churned as we pulled into the underground parking garage, past security that waved Marcus through without question. We took a private elevator, of course, directly to the 28th floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that was elegant but not cold, with a stunning view of the city and a receptionist who smiled warmly when she saw Marcus. You must be Emma, she said, standing to shake my hand. I'm Patricia. Mr. Volkov asked me to show you to your office when you arrived. My office? I looked at Marcus, confused. I thought I'd be in a cubicle or something. Mr. Volkov doesn't do cubicles, Patricia said, leading me down a corridor lined with glass-walled conference rooms and offices. Here we are. She opened a door to a corner office that made my breath catch. It wasn't huge, but it had windows on 2 walls, a proper desk with a computer already set up, and bookshelves that matched the ones in my apartment. There was even a small sitting area with a couch and coffee table. This can't be mine, I whispered. It is. Damien's voice came from behind me, and I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, watching my reaction with those unreadable dark eyes. He looked different here, still devastating in a navy suit, but somehow more grounded. This was his domain. Do you like it? It's too much. I don't deserve... Stop. He pushed off the doorframe and entered the office, his presence immediately filling the space. That word, deserve, I don't want to hear it from you again. You've earned this, Emma. By surviving 3 years with Derek Matthews without losing yourself completely, by finding the courage to demand what was yours, by saying yes when I offered you a chance to be more than anyone told you that you could be. Patricia had discreetly disappeared, closing the door behind her. We were alone, and the air between us felt charged with something I couldn't name. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I don't know how to be the person you think I am. Then learn. He moved closer, and I had to resist the urge to step back. I have a project for you. A small acquisition. A boutique design firm that's hemorrhaging clients because they can't manage relationships. I want you to assess what's broken and design a strategy to fix it. When do you need it by? End of the week. My eyes widened. That's impossible. I'd need to review their client history, interview staff, analyze their processes, then you'd better get started. He smiled slightly. All the files are on your computer. My assistant Grace will coordinate any meetings you need. And Emma? Yes? I'll be watching. Not because I doubt you, but because I want to see you succeed. He turned toward the door, then paused. Oh, and the company has a strict policy about working through lunch. Grace will make sure you eat. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone in my office with an impossible deadline and the strangest feeling that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The week that followed was the most intense of my life. I threw myself into the project with a desperation that bordered on obsession, arriving early and staying late, reviewing files until my eyes burned and my back ached from sitting too long. The design firm, a small company called Artemis Creative, was a mess of mismanaged expectations, poor communication, and talented people being held back by incompetent leadership. It reminded me painfully of my own situation with Derek. But unlike with Derek, I had the power to fix it. I interviewed every employee, reviewed every client complaint, mapped out every failure point in their process. Then I designed a complete overhaul. New communication protocols, client management software, restructured teams based on actual skills rather than seniority. By Thursday evening, I had a 50-page presentation ready. By Friday morning, I was terrified. Damien had called a meeting for 9 a.m. in the main conference room. I arrived at 8:30, my hands shaking as I set up the projector and arranged my notes. Grace brought me coffee and a reassuring smile, but nothing could calm the voice in my head, screaming that I was about to fail spectacularly in front of the man who'd given me everything. Damien arrived at exactly 9, followed by 3 other executives I recognized from the company website. He took the seat at the head of the table, his expression professionally neutral, and gestured for me to begin. I don't remember most of what I said. The presentation flowed out of me. Data, analysis, recommendations, projected outcomes. I showed them the broken pieces and how they fit together, explained why the current leadership was failing, detailed exactly how to transform Artemis Creative from a sinking ship into a profitable acquisition. When I finished, silence filled the room. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying me with that intensity I'd come to recognize. Questions? He asked the other executives. For 20 minutes, they grilled me, challenged my assumptions, questioned my data, pushed back on my recommendations, and for 20 minutes I held my ground, defending my work with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. When the last question had been answered, Damien stood. Thank you, Emma. We'll discuss and get back to you. My heart sank. That was corporate speak for nice try, but no. I gathered my materials with shaking hands, trying not to let my disappointment show. I'd failed. My first real project, and Emma. Damien's voice stopped me at the door. A moment. The other executives filed out, leaving us alone. I braced myself for the letdown, the kind words before the inevitable firing. Instead, Damien smiled. Really smiled, with genuine warmth that transformed his entire face. That was extraordinary, he said quietly. You just convinced 3 of the most skeptical people in this industry that a complete unknown has better instincts than leaders with decades of experience. But you said you'd discuss and get back to me, because I need them to think they had input in the decision. But make no mistake, Emma, we're acquiring Artemis Creative, and you're going to oversee the entire restructuring. He moved closer, and my breath caught. You did exactly what I knew you could do. You saw what was broken and knew how to fix it. That's not a skill that can be taught, it's a gift. Tears pricked my eyes, sudden and unexpected. I was so scared I'd disappoint you. You couldn't. He reached out, his thumb catching a tear that had escaped. Do you know why? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Because you care too much about doing things right, about proving yourself, about being worthy of the chances you've been given. His hand lingered on my cheek, warm and solid and real. Derek tried to convince you that caring made you weak, but it's your greatest strength, Emma. Never forget that. Something shifted between us in that moment. The air felt heavier, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Damien's eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to my lips, and I realized with sudden clarity that this man, this powerful, dangerous, impossible man, wanted me. Not as an employee. Not as a project or a charity case, as a woman. The recognition should have terrified me, should have sent me running back to the safety of low expectations and invisible existence. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my heart hammering with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Damien, I whispered. I know. His voice was rough, strained. This complicates things. You work for me. There are rules, policies, expectations about professional boundaries. I don't care about rules. The words surprised us both. He laughed, the sound low and intimate. No, I don't suppose you do. Not anymore. His hand dropped from my face, and I immediately missed the contact. But I care about you, Emma, about your career, your future, your ability to build something that's entirely yours without anyone questioning whether you earned it. What are you saying? I'm saying that I want you, more than I've wanted anything in years. But I won't touch you, won't cross that line, until you're established enough in your own right that no one can claim your success came from my bed rather than your talent. He stepped back, putting physical distance between us that felt like a chasm. Can you understand that? I could. Of course I could. After 3 years of being reduced to Derek's accessory, the idea of building a reputation that was entirely mine was intoxicating. But it was also frustrating, because the connection I felt with Damien was undeniable, electric, and growing stronger every day. How long? I asked. 6 months. Maybe a year. Long enough that when I finally make you mine, no one will question that you earned everything you have. His eyes held mine, burning with intensity and promise. Can you wait that long, Emma? Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was insane, that I barely knew this man, that he was my boss, that the power dynamic was all wrong, that I should run as far and as fast as possible, but I'd spent 3 years being logical, being careful, being everything Derek wanted me to be, and it had destroyed me. Maybe it was time to be a little bit reckless. I can wait, I said, if you can. Damien's smile was devastating. Then we have an understanding. You build your empire, I'll build mine. And when the time is right, I finished, we'll see what happens. He nodded once, then turned toward the door. But before he left, he looked back at me, and the hunger in his expression made my knees weak. For what it's worth, Emma Chen, he said softly, you were never useless. You were always extraordinary. You just needed someone to see it. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the conference room with my racing heart and the growing certainty that Damien Volkov hadn't just given me a job. He'd given me back myself. 18 months later, the boardroom was packed with investors, journalists, and industry leaders, all waiting to hear about Volkov Industries' latest acquisition. I stood at the front of the room in a custom suit that cost more than my old apartment, my presentation displayed on screens behind me, and felt nothing but calm confidence. In the 1.5 years since that first project, I'd overseen 17 acquisitions, transformed 12 failing companies into profitable ventures, and built a reputation as one of the most innovative strategists in the industry. My name was in business journals. My insights were quoted in articles. And most importantly, I'd done it all on my own merit, with Damien watching from a careful distance as I became everything he'd known I could be. The presentation went flawlessly. When I finished, the room erupted in applause, and I caught Damien's eye from where he sat in the back row. He smiled, that private smile that was just for me, and nodded once, the signal we'd been waiting for. After the meeting, I found him on the rooftop terrace of the Volkov building, looking out at the city we'd conquered together. He turned when he heard my heels on the stone, and something in his expression made my breath catch. 18 months, he said quietly. Give or take a few days. You've been counting? Every single day. He closed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hands framing my face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the hunger in his eyes. You've become everything I knew you would be, Emma. You're brilliant, powerful, respected in your own right. No one will ever question that you earned your success. And now? I asked, my heart hammering. Now I'm done waiting. He kissed me, and it was everything I'd imagined during those long months of careful distance. Passionate, possessive, claiming me in a way that should have been terrifying, but instead felt like coming home. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. I love you, he said simply. I've loved you since I saw you fall on that sidewalk, covered in rain and blood and determination not to stay broken. Will you let me spend the rest of my life reminding you that you were never useless, that you were always extraordinary? Tears streamed down my face, but they were happy tears, healing tears. Yes, I whispered. Yes to all of it. He kissed me again, and in that moment, I finally understood what Damien had given me. Not just a job or an apartment or a second chance. He'd given me the space to become myself again. The Emma I'd been before Derek, only stronger, fiercer, more fully realized. And now, with my empire built and my worth proven beyond question, I was free to choose him, not because I needed him to save me, but because I wanted to build a life alongside someone who'd always seen my strength even when I couldn't. Take me home, I murmured against his lips. Our home, he corrected, and the possessiveness in his voice sent shivers down my spine. The penthouse has been empty without you. I thought you wanted to wait until you were ready to be mine without doubt or hesitation. His arms tightened around me. Are you ready, Emma? I thought about the broken woman on the courthouse steps, convinced she was useless and invisible. Then I thought about the woman I'd become. Confident, successful, powerful in her own right. The journey between those 2 versions of myself had been painful and terrifying and absolutely necessary. And now, finally, I was ready. I'm ready, I said. Take me home, Damien. He swept me into his arms, carrying me toward the private elevator like I weighed nothing, and I laughed, genuinely, freely, with a joy I'd thought Derek had killed forever. But he hadn't. He'd only buried it, and Damien Volkov had given me the tools to dig it back up, dust it off, and let it shine brighter than ever before. My ex had called me useless, but Damien had shown me the truth. I was extraordinary, and this time I'd never forget it.